So, in this episode we're going to be talking about aliases and output formatting. So let's quickly bring up our PowerShell shell. Let's go and make some of that text a little bit bigger so it's easier for everyone to read. Slight error there. Okay, so within PowerShell we have quite a lot of commands, but we also have this concept of aliases. So for example, if we have a command like get-service spooler, and we pipe that to get member, just like we did before, that's going to show me the membership properties of get service, or the spooler service itself. But I can also use GM, this kind of abbreviation for get member, and that works perfectly fine for me as well. This is an alias. We've also got aliases for other such services as well. So for example, get-child item is actually alias to dir. Sometimes you also find multiple aliases as well. So if you think of the Linux or Unix way of listing out stuff in a directory, we can use ls to actually list out stuff in a directory, and there we go. We can see that we're doing exactly the same thing. This isn't a separate command, this is just an alias for get-child item. We can see our list of aliases that are available to us in PowerShell. So I'm just going to clear the screen down there, and if I type in alias, there they all are. Loads and loads of default aliases down here. Everything from things like kill for stop process to LP for line print, which is actually going to outprinter. You know, I've never actually tried outprinter. Maybe I should one day. That should actually send outputs directly to a printer itself. We've got things like GDR for get PS drive and GHY for get history and all sorts down here. And if we come up here, we should be able to see our dir is aliased to get child item. Now we can actually go and create new aliases if we really want to. That's not a problem. So we might do, for example, new-item. Oh, sorry, not item. New-alias, and we'll go for a name of. Oops. I can't type this morning. We'll go for new alias of a name of list, and what we'll do is we'll put that to get-child item. So if we whack enter on that one, we should now be able to type list, and it's going to run get child item as well. I could put anything I want in there, so it could do, you know, a new alias for a name banana, which goes to get child item. Now every time I type banana, I get child item. That's wonderful. There's a few other things we can do with options on new alias. So if we do something like new alias name is going to be W, and the value of this is going to be get-wmi object. We'll get to WMI object later on. That is actually a rather important thing, but that's a whole episode on its own. Get description. We'll give the description as quick access to WMI, and we'll go and give this an option of read only. Now again, if you, whoops, it would help if I could actually spell, wouldn't it? This is half of what PowerShell really is. If ever you jump into PowerShell, which hopefully you're doing right now, there it is. 90% of the time, if something doesn't work, you probably typoed it. Check this out. New alias, a parameter cannot be found that matches parameter name descripton. Yeah, I kind of missed out an I on that one. It happens to everybody. So that should work perfectly fine for me. I can now use the alias W to go and initiate get WMI object. And this is my current BIOS, because this is actually a virtual machine I'm using. So, very basically there, that's the aliasing system. Very, very good in PowerShell, very useful in PowerShell. It's just an abbreviation, but when you're actually writing scripts, you don't really want to use aliases all the time. You want to actually use the full commandlets. That way it makes it much more readable if somebody else is actually reading that script. But if you are typing out one or two things in the shell, go ahead, use aliases, not a problem. Save your fingers on that. So, next thing we want to actually look at is outputting, as in outputting of data and actually seeing it in different ways. So if I go and run something basic here, like get-service, again, we will see here a nice list of services that are running on this computer. So here we go, plenty of stuff that is stopped and plenty of stuff that is started. But the type of data this is actually outputting in, this is outputting by default in something called a format table. Now it's a table because I've got status, I've got name, I've got display name there at the top, and I've got these columns of data. You can imagine this a bit like an Excel spreadsheet set out. So format table works perfectly well for a lot of things. Not every commandlet is actually defaulted to format table though. It depends on who's actually programmed this commandlet. There's different ways of actually outputting this data. If I use get service and pipe that to format-table, which just allows me to see exactly the same data as well, I can actually send this in a couple of different ways. So we could do something like, for example, get service, select, let's just select just the names on there, so we're getting a big list here of all the services that are running on this computer. And what we'll do is we'll pipe that again, and we'll actually send that to format-wide. So there's another way of actually approaching this. With format wide, instead of getting one list, I actually get multiple lists. I'm kind of zoomed in at the moment. If I was using a smaller font size, I'd have multiple columns here. But it's another way of displaying your data if you've got big lists of data. Another way of doing this, if we do an example of get dash, whoops, I'm going to need to launch this as administrator because I'm about to play about with events again. So let's make that format a little bit bigger. So let's do get dash event log, and we'll do log name security newest 5. Now there's a slight issue here. By default this get event log is sending us to a format table, and that's all cool. But these are the last 5 events that have happened in the event log of security. Now Windows by default in the event log of security actually logs just log on and log off events. But we can see it's actually trimmed this a bit. So it's cut off some of our messages, so we can't see the full messages. So if you're getting this result from some commandlets, you might want to display the data in a different way. And one of the other common ways of doing that is format-list. Now format-list is going to take this data and it's actually going to put it in a different method, or it's going to export it in a different way for me to the shell. And we can see that this is actually showing me a complete overview, or complete output, sorry, of each of the properties, including all of these messages. So it's kind of hard to decode this if we've got 5 of these listed. So let's just come back in here and just do newest 1, just so we can kind of break it down. And there you can see there is the most recent event log for the security log. There's a couple of other things we can actually do with outputting and formatting data here. One that's actually, well, it's one that you're not going to use that often. But if I take something like hello world, like this is just string data. Hello world, if I type that in with 2 inverted commas, it just prints hello world to the screen. That's not a problem. But if I take that text and I send that text to format-hex, what this is actually going to do, well, it's actually going to show me what that is in hexadecimal. If you go and look at the documentation for format hex, you'll see that it's actually outputs in many different ways as well. So if we actually go and have a look at format-hex, no, I don't want Fortnite, and if we're going to have a look again, the Microsoft documentation for it, notice format hex can actually output, where are we, in multiple different formats. So if you ever wanted to do an encoding of ASCII, that's the ASCII encoding for hello world, but you can also put it in Unicode, UTF-7, UTF-8, whatever you actually need. So if you ever need to take text and convert it to hexadecimal for, well, whatever reason you fancy converting it to hexadecimal, you can do that with format-hex. The final one, which is actually very useful for displaying large amounts of data. So say if I get something like, again, get-service. Okay, and I've got a relatively large amount of data here. This could be services, this could be, users from Active Directory, users from Office 365, mailboxes, whatever. It's a big list of data with some specific properties on there. I want to display it in a slightly nicer way than actually doing it in the shell. But if I send that to something called out-gridview, this is really useful. This only works on PowerShell version 3 and above. It bounces this out, which is a lovely little external window, and we can flip things around with name and display name, just like kind of a standard window in here for for Windows. There's also nice little filters on top of that, and we can add nice little criterias in here. So kind of a cool thing to actually go play with if you're getting a lot of data here. We can also put things on here like title. So we could do dash title is Bananarama. There we go, Bananarama. We can see that title has actually changed to Bananarama. If you go through the documentation for out-gridview, what you actually get is a lot more options in here. You can define things like the sizes and the data types that go into there, colors, fonts, the usual sort of stuff to make it look pretty. So if you're actually trying to make a script that's going to output a lot of information that a user is going to see, or that a non-technical person is going to see, it might be nice to actually make that output in out-gridview, as it's going to, well, not scare them too much. Okay.